Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm the Chess Nerd, and today we're going to be looking at a very special game played in the Zurich 1953 Candidates Tournament between Vasily Smyslov with the white pieces, former world champion 57-58, and Max Euwe, another former world champion from 1935 to 1937. So Smyslov here plays with the white pieces, and what's so special about this game is that Smyslov destroys him, but even more so, he misses a crucial opportunity in the middle game to seize and win very quickly. So let's look at it. It starts off as a Reti opening, started off by Richard Reti himself. Knight f3, knight f6, g3, d5. Bishop g2, bishop f5. Castles, knight bd7. d3, c6. Knight d2. White are threatening a potential push here in the future. h6, a potential hideaway for the black bishop. But the better move here was actually e5, taking cover of the center. But this black square bishop would have been a bit behind his pawns. And so, Vasily Smyslov punishes h6 with e4, sacrificing a pawn in the center. And after takes, knight takes. Knight d4, attacking the bishop. Knight takes d2. White can't take the bishop here on f5 because of knight takes f1. So knight takes d2, bishop takes d2, and bishop h7. And now, as we see, white don't have any center pawns, but they're much more developed than black. All of their minor pieces are developed, whereas black has a nasty bishop on f8 that's guarded by his two pawns, and this bishop, you'll see, will not have much play in the game. His knight is not the best, and his bishop has a beautiful diagonal, but is not serving for anything thus far. Smyslov continues with bishop c3, queen c7, looking at great castles, queen f3, e5, so black is really tardy in development, and white may try to punish him with rook fe1 here. Great castles, knight b3, and f6 here. Notice how after f6, which was the mistake, black should have played f5 here, but after f6, all of these white squares are so vulnerable and weak for black. And this will really cost Euwe a lot further in the game. After f6, bishop a5. So the idea here with Vasily is that after Euwe plays b6 here, this whole diagonal will be weakened and more easily targeted for an attack. And so Euwe responds with knight b6, c4, threatening c5 here. Because of the pin, it would win a knight. Rook d3, attacking the queen and defended by the bishop pretty nicely. Too bad his bishop isn't out, because domination of the d-file with rook hd8 would have been very strong for black. But no, Vasily Smyslov plays knight h5, and now we see how this f6 push was very bad. It opens up this alley here. White have some ideas with bishop h3 check. And remember, c5 is still threatened here. So black has to do something about that. And Euwe does. He plays queen e7, taking off from the pin here. So no c5 is needed anymore or threatened. And taking away from this queen e8 threat. Bishop f1 trying to hunt down this rook. g6. g6 here, another bad move. You're closing off your bishop, but the queen needed to go somewhere else. And so Smyslov reclines back with queen e2. Rook d7. The rook can't go to d8 because of this nasty pin again. c5 would have won the exchange. Rook d7. Queen e3, threatening this knight. After king b8 here, white could gain back the given pawn here on b6 with bishop takes 8 takes and queen takes b6. But after queen d8, white doesn't have too much of an attack. The queen has to go back to e3, and now the mastery of the d-file is pretty strong for black here. So Smyslov chose against that and played rook a d1, confronting this vulnerable d-file that black is not really controlling. Knight c8, bishop h3. Black can't push f5 here to prevent bishop takes right now, because rook takes d7, and after queen takes d7, there's a nice little fork. Queen takes e5, check, gaining the rook. And so black has to exchange first, takes, and f5. This is where the steam and the soup and the stew all come together to formulate a very appetizing dinner, if you know what I mean. Bishop b4, sacrificing the bishop. Why can't black take? After Euwe would take on b4 here, Smyslov has queen takes e5 check with this recurring threat. And after queen c7 here, this would also be losing for Euwe because of bishop takes bishop, and after rook takes bishop, queen takes h6, regaining his pawn, and this time it's a very important pawn that he gains. Overall, this structure is just weak for black, and it's easy for white to penetrate in this defense, already attacking the rook here. And so queen f6 is played, bishop c3 attacking this vulnerable pinned e5 pawn, bishop g7, and now this is where the magic starts. Knight c5 threatening the fork here on d7. White kind of masters the square, so there's no need in black to cover it up because knight d7 would be played anyway. And so black has to play king a8 just to prevent the fork. Can't cover the square quite yet. And this is the brilliant sacrificial moment in which Smyslov plays knight takes b7. So because he has the d7 square here, he's allowed to make the king weak. And this vulnerability absolutely helps in this sacrifice. So knight takes b7, king takes b7, and rook d7 check. My teacher always told me a rook on the 7th file is winning, no matter the material. Don't take that advice for granted. King a8 and queen c5. Really playing it slow, not too aggressive on the sacrifice. Here, Vasily Smyslov relies on long-term compensation and is really worming himself in to the black opposition. But here's what Vasily missed. So before clicking on this video, you saw the title, What Would Have Been? Oh, what would have been? What would have been such a beautiful tactic that even my eyes were not even ready when I saw this. So in round 18, Smyslov has a winning combination here that Bronstein reports in the book, Zürich 1953, bishop g2, threatening this pawn, and if black captures back, bishop takes c6 with a windmill attack after king b8 and rook b7 check. And so Bronstein gives the variation rook e8, bishop takes e8, sacrificing another piece, rook takes e5, queen takes e5, yes sir. This is the winning combination. After queen takes e5, white to play and win. Bishop takes c6 with 2 pieces left. King b8, rook b7, king a8 is forced. And now white has a choice of 4 mates to mate the black king. So rook b6 is mate, rook b5 is mate, any rook b is mate here, which is so pretty and so rare. So what a game this would have been with this sacrifice here. But no, Vasily Smyslov, although he's good in tactics, is more of a strategic player. So he'll play out a 70-move game and exhaust his opponent mentally and physically on the board. until he gets his win. That was his style of play, and you have to respect it. So he didn't play bishop g2 here, he played queen c5. Knight b6, don't worry, there's still craziness here. Rook takes g7, madness on the board, queen takes g7, and bishop takes e5. Threatening both queen takes c6 checkmate-ish. I mean, if the queen goes to g8 or something. And the skewer here between queen and rook. And so black can't really defend his rook with the only real move, queen g8 or queen f8. Because white would simply take on c6 and it's checkmate. A beautiful diagonal checkmate here. And so Euwe plays queen d7, holding onto the c6 pawn dearly, and Smyslov takes this rook. And after an exchange like this or a long variation like this happens, you have to assess the material. So what's the material here? You see here, okay, they both have a pawn. So Vasily Smyslov has an extra pawn here. Both have a pawn, and both have 3 pawns. So Smyslov is up a pawn on b2, and he's up the bishop pair against the knight and bishop. The bishop pair is worth much more than the knight and bishop here in this open position. So big advantage goes to Smyslov, and very weak pawn on c6 and also on a7. King b7, bishop d4, bishop f1, bishop g8, b3 to defend the c4 pawn, f4, a4, planning a5 here, f takes g3, h takes g3, bishop f7, a4, a5, knight c8, bishop g2, queen d6, trying to exchange queens. Bronstein here, before bishop g2, he says this is an error, a technical error. He says white would have won with a6 here. And if king c7, the boat floats. But this is a weakness that will eventually fall and white will win. However, if king takes a6 and decides to be adventurous, white to play and win here. I'm going to leave you 5 seconds. Okay, time's up. White plays the curious queen b4, very sneaky. So what this does, it puts the king in a mating net and threatens at the very same time c5 with winning the queen. After queen c4, bishop takes c4, and it's completely winning. And here, anything to block this threat, let's say c5, would just be met with queen b5 checkmate. But okay, Smyslov isn't the best tactically and plays bishop g2. Queen d6, trying to exchange queens because this is where Euwe has the best chances of gaining a draw from this. a6, king takes, and now bishop takes c6. Euwe has no choice to exchange queens because queen b5 checkmate is coming. So queen takes, bishop takes on c5. Knight b6, king f1, bishop e6, king e2. Knight d7, bishop d4. Very clever move, controlling all knight squares here on these diagonals. King a5. Black lets go of this pawn, but if Vasily were to take, he has convincing counterplay with king b4 here. So bishop c3, king b6, and bishop e4 attacking the g6 pawn. g5, bishop d4, and here Euwe plays the same king a5, hoping to get compensation, but this time the bishop is on e4. So white can take on a7, and after king b4, bishop c2. But still, black gets counterattack chances with king c3, bishop d1, knight e5, king e3, knight c6, bishop b6, g4, king f4, h5, bishop e3. These two pawns are what really make the game, and this h5 pawn for black is very weak. It's going to fall very soon. Knight a5, gaining back one of the pawns. King e5, betting on tempo. Bishop c8. c5, knight takes b3. Now, if I were white, maybe this is counterintuitive, but I would actually take the knight, because after king takes c6, this looks pretty promising. Even though it's opposite bishop endgame, I would just win the pawn and then win these 2 pawns, and this is pretty winning. But that's just me. Bishop e2. Keeping the bishop pair is actually logically stronger. Bishop b5, covering every square that the knight is trying to protect. Knight c4, king f4, trying to do king g5 here. Knight takes e3. This doesn't change anything, because after f takes e3, this once weak pawn becomes a very strong pawn here. King b4, white are gonna have to let go of a pawn, but this does not matter anymore. Bishop e8, directly targeting this h5 pawn. h4, g takes h4, takes on c5. h5, g3, king takes g3. King d5, h6, forcing bishop f5, otherwise h7 the next move. King f4, bishop h7, king g5. And here, Max Euwe abandoned the game just because of bishop g6 that black can't do to prevent this from losing. If king e4, trying to get this pawn, bishop g6, wins on the spot. If king e5, waiting it out, bishop g6, wins on the spot. If bishop g8 here, white can still play h7. And after bishop takes h7, bishop takes h7, white still control these squares and is completely winning. And so for those reasons, Euwe lost this crushing game after 68 moves. It could have been after 30 moves, for all we know. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Have a good night, and see you next time.